ask you all now to please stand for the parading of our colors. Please remain standing for our national anthem. As they exit the stage, that was amazing. Now it is my pleasure. Yeah, Steve. Now it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's MC, Ms. Sara Jacobs. Sara is an active and highly respected member of the San Diego community. She currently serves as the CEO of the San Diego LGBT Community Center. Sara is a devoted champion for LGBT plus and immigration rights. Her career includes time in the Obama administration, work with the national and local advocacy organizations, and service in the Public Rights Division of the California Justice as a Deputy Attorney General. She has also served as the Executive Director of Immigration Equality, a national organization focused on LGBT immigrant rights. Please join me in welcoming tonight's MC, Sara Jacobs.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sara Jacobs. It's my honor in my personal capacity to be the Chief Executive Officer of the San Diego LGBT Community Center. I'm honored to be serving as your MC tonight with Congresswoman Sara Jacobs. We know decisions are made by those who show up. There are many elected officials who are out in their districts, and not everyone is having a town hall. So I want to thank the Congresswoman Sara Jacobs for bringing us together tonight. And I want to thank each and every person who came here to show up. Thank you. You are what make democracy work. I want to thank a big thank you to Principal Hilpers and Madison High School for making tonight possible. And before we begin, a couple rules. Please keep the commentary to a minimum and limit yourself to one question so that we can hear from as many community members as possible. Because this is an official government event, we kindly ask you to avoid campaign and candidate-related questions. We ask that everyone remain respectful, and if disruptions do occur repeatedly, attendees will be asked to leave and continue their activities outside the venue. This event will be live streamed on Congresswoman Sara Jacobs' social media and will be available for viewing after. You can find the recording and future town hall information at sarajacobs.house.gov/town-halls. All guests have the option to submit questions for the Congresswoman online when you registered. If you didn't submit a question online, you were also able to write one today on a card. As Congresswoman Sara Jacobs' team hands me these questions and your note cards, I will call 4 names at a time. Please make your way to one of the microphones when your name is called so that you can ask your questions directly to the Congresswoman. I apologize for messing up anyone's name. If I get it wrong, please correct me when you're at the mic. We will begin with pre-submitted questions. Again, to keep things moving, please limit yourself to one question and note that not all questions may be answered tonight due to time constraints. With that, let's get started. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Sara Jacobs to the stage. All right, we're going to begin with the pre-submitted questions, and I'm going to start us off. Congresswoman Sara Jacobs, what tangible actions are you and the Democrats taking to stop the illegal and unlawful actions of Trump and the Republicans?
Well, thank you, Kara, so much for doing this. Thank you to principal, to everyone here at Madison High. I know it's been a lot of work to put this together, and thank you all for coming, because one of the most important things we can be doing to stand up to President Trump is to continue to show up and hold our leaders accountable, yes, even me. And so give all of yourselves a pat on the back. You are already doing the most important thing you can be doing just by showing up here tonight. So thank you so much. So look, I'm very, very happy to be home right now. Very happy. Let me say that one more time. But let's be clear, Speaker Johnson canceled Congress because he was so afraid of having us vote on releasing the Epstein files. And before he sent us home for the summer, the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans, signed by President Trump, signed into law the one big, ugly bill. And that is literally going to cut millions of people off of their health care across this country, millions of people off of the food assistance that they need. And they're doing it all in order to pass tax cuts for wealthy people who, frankly, don't need those tax cuts. And so here's what we're doing to push back. So first of all, I like to remind everyone, we're playing zone defense, not man-to-man. Okay, I'm not great at sports, but I hope that reference works. But basically, each one of us individually isn't going to be able to do everything that we need to do. But all together, all of us are going to do what we need to do. So here's what House Democrats are doing. We are introducing legislation. So for instance, I introduced the Delete Doge Act, which will defund Doge. I introduced the Securing U.S. National Security Act, which would have protected USAID. Other colleagues of mine have introduced legislation protecting the Treasury Department, Department of Education. This is really important because we need to be having things ready so that when my Republican colleagues say that they care about these things, that they're worried about what's happening, we have legislation ready to go to say, like, okay, if you really care, put your money where your mouth is. Here's a piece of legislation. Look, like, we know most of this legislation is not actually going to get passed, but having it there is really, really important. So that's part one of the four-part strategy. Okay, part two is the litigation. So these are all of the court cases you're hearing about, right? We've had over 400 court cases against Trump actions, and while Congress doesn't have the standing to sue, we're working with outside groups who do, and trying to do amicus briefs and whatever we can to help bolster those lawsuits, and by and large, those lawsuits have been successful. Not in every case, but they've been largely successful. The third part of the four-part strategy is oversight. So I've gone down to Guantanamo Bay to see what's happening there. I recently visited the Otay Mesa Detention Center. I have continued to show up and ask questions because it's important. It's our constitutionally mandated job to do it. But we also know that when we show up and ask questions, their behavior changes. Because when they know someone's watching, when they know someone is going to hold them accountable, they act differently. And so we've been doing that, right? We've been showing up, we've been asking questions. That's a big part of what we're doing. But then the fourth part of the four-part strategy is all of you. It's public pressure. And I know it's easy to feel like, oh, this public pressure doesn't work, they don't care what we think, but it isn't true. It isn't true. We actually saw them change their actions on federal funding freeze because so many people spoke out. And we saw them change their actions on student visa revocations because so many people spoke out. And I think the more that we can put on this public pressure, the more we can talk about the real human impacts their policies are having, the more that we'll be able to get them to change their behavior. So that's the four-part strategy of how we're pushing back. But there's another key component about what we're doing right now. And that is not just pushing back, but also building for the future. Because it's not enough to say, Donald Trump is bad. Donald Trump is bad. But we also need to recognize that the status quo was not working. The status quo was not working for so many people in our community, right? And I'll be honest, I understand why some people voted for Trump, because they felt like their option was more of the same or change. And hopefully that change would be for better. But the thing is that we've seen that change hasn't actually been for better, right? Prices haven't come down. We're not ending wars. All of these things that he promised haven't happened. And I think that's why it's important that we can't cede the reform agenda to the other side. And so one of the things I'm spending my time doing right now is really focusing on how we use this time to also build what we want those future policies to look like. So for instance, I introduced a bill called the Legacy Act that's going to, that would revert back the estate tax to what it was pre the One Big Ugly Bill, and then make sure that 15% of that funding goes directly towards affordable child care. Because Republicans passed this One Big Ugly Bill, and it cut all these services in order to give tax cuts to the wealthy, and I think we should do the opposite, right? I think we should tax wealthy people and big corporations more in order to provide services for people. And let me tell you, here in San Diego, the number one thing I hear from all of you for the entire 5 years that I've been in office is that the cost of living here in San Diego is too high, right? And there are real things we could be doing to address that, but they require resources. And right now we're being told a lie. We're being told that there aren't enough resources for those things, but it isn't actually true. There are plenty of resources in this country if we have the political will to actually tax them in order to provide those services for people. So I'm really focused on not only pushing back, which is really, really important, but also how we spend this time building for the future so that when we're back in the majority, we're ready to go with good policies that we can pass immediately and make people's lives better.
Congresswoman Jacobs, what are you doing to help fight the immigration policy of having ICE detain lawful immigrants, and how do we stay informed and care for our immigrant communities?
Thank you for this question. I know it's something that's been on top Because we are a border community, right? Like, we know better than most how important our immigrant community is to our economy and the fabric of our society. I can't tell you how many times I argue with my colleagues who are like telling me all about the southern border, and I'm like, oh wait, don't you represent like Wisconsin? You're talking about the Canadian border? Because I'm actually here in San Diego, and that's not what it's like at all. And so first of all, I think we have a really important role as San Diegans to stand up and make sure that people understand what it's actually like as a border community. And it's not what they see on Fox News. It isn't. Like, San Diego is actually one of the safest, if not the safest, big city in the country. And I would argue that's not despite that we're a border city, it's because we're a border city. And so I think all of us here in San Diego have a responsibility to talk about the role that the border and immigration plays in our lives. Now, that being said, what the Trump administration is doing is to immigrants is horrific. I can't tell you, like, at least probably every day, my office gets a phone call about some horrific situation of someone being detained, being treated unfairly. And so, you know, I'll be honest with you, we're in the triple minority. So a lot of the things that I would want to do legislatively to fix this issue just aren't possible at the moment. But oversight is an incredibly important piece of this, because when we show up, when we ask questions, their behavior actually does change. So, you know, I said in the answer to my last question, right, like, I visited Guantanamo Bay, and I saw how they were planning on housing immigrants there. And shortly after our visit, they decided to take everyone all of the immigrants out of Guantanamo Bay because they realized it actually didn't make sense. And recently I was at the Otay Mesa Detention Center where, because of information that I received from our community, I was able to ask really important questions about access to medicine, access to translation services, make sure that folks there had access to the forms they need so that Congress people can help them with their cases. And that was all because folks in our community let us know what they heard was going on, and we could go there and address it. Like, I'm under no false pretenses. I know they clean things up when we go, right? Okay, we all know that, so we don't have to pretend. But even just going and showing up and asking questions has changed their behavior. I was supposed to go on an oversight visit to LA to visit the troops there. And literally the night before, I got a phone call at 9 p.m. the night before I was supposed to drive up to LA at 6 a.m. to say the trip was canceled. Pretty sketch, if you ask me. But shortly thereafter, after much of us like pushing and prodding and trying to get the oversight visit rescheduled, the Marines were pulled out of LA. And I don't want to say it's because we were going to go, but I think the fact that they knew they were going to have to answer questions, that they knew that there might be a bad press story, that they knew that like they were going to have to answer for it, accelerated that decision. And so I know sometimes it feels like oversight, like, what are you talking about? You're going, you're asking questions, they don't care. But it actually does matter, and especially in the immigration system, we know that the more that we can make sure that the law is being followed, the more we can help protect people as much as we can until we have the majority back and can pass the legislative fixes that we know are actually needed.
Congresswoman Jacobs, what are you doing specifically to ensure that Palestinians are receiving immediate humanitarian aid? And are you concerned about possible genocide against Palestinians?
I'm really glad you asked this question. I know there are many folks in the audience who care deeply about this. Look, many of you know I'm the youngest Jewish member of Congress. My family lives in Tel Aviv, so everything that's happening is deeply personal to me. I think that it is possible that actually most Americans believe that what happened on October 7th was horrible, and what's happening in Gaza is horrible. They don't need to be at a I hear you. Look,
Read the Quran. Read the Quran. It says kill.
We're going to try to remain respectful, but I know we want to answer the genocide question, so if we can have Congresswoman Jacobs answer that second part of the question.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I am very concerned that there might be. I'll be honest with you, but I'm not a lawyer, and that is a legal determination. I think we've clearly seen serious atrocities. I think we've likely seen war crimes, and we've definitely seen forced displacement that could amount to ethnic cleansing. And that's why I've been so focused on what we can do to end this. So since March of last year, I would say that we shouldn't send offensive weapons to Israel. Now that's different than defensive.
No, it's not.
I don't think Israeli
Weapons are
civilians.
weapons. Weapons are weapons.
I don't think Israeli civilians should be punished for the actions of their government.
Should Gaza residents be punished for the actions?
You had a public awareness conference calling Sudan genocide. What's the difference?
The difference is that the State Department,
Get the starting there.
Hey folks, remember, one of the ground rules was remaining respectful. Let's let the Congresswoman finish her answer.
and I want to answer your question because I know this is like I understand why everyone is so passionate about it. Like what we're seeing in Gaza, it eats at my heart. Like seeing those kids with their bones sticking out using trash bags as diapers, that is horrific. The difference in Sudan is actually that there was a legal determination that genocide was happening. And that's why I say that this is a legal determination. I think it's probably.
Martin Taylor Greene called it a genocide. Wow. What you're doing. You're being lukewarm. You want to be a team player with the devil. What's that have to do with Clairemont? This is from Israel. Let's get real. You are going to J Street Drive and abandon us at Gaza because you would not support that. Get real with us, representative.
I hear you. I hear you, and I am getting real with you. I hear you, and I'm getting real with you. The real honest answer is that the technical term of genocide is a legal determination.
Have you asked a lawyer? Have you asked a lawyer? Ask a lawyer. You can't.
That determination was made in Sudan, and it has not yet been made. Now, I think it's very probable and very likely that that's what is happening in Israel. But regardless,
That's the question.
my allegiance is with the United States, and I represent our community here in San Diego.
He obviously cares. You're just being a dick now. Can you say free Palestine?
There should be a free Palestinian state. Yes, that's easy for me to say. And
Sit
I believe there should be a free Palestinian state, and that's why since March of last year, I have called for no offensive weapons to be sent to Israel, and I helped co-lead the Block the Bombs Act that would do that. And I really appreciate your passion on this issue because it is something that all of our consciences should be worried about. It is horrible what's happening. horrified about the U.S. government.
Congresswoman Jacobs, why did you vote against Marjorie Taylor Greene's amendment to remove defense funding for Israel?
I appreciate this question. I know that there's been a lot of conversation about this. So what Marjorie Taylor Greene's amendment did is it would remove all funding from anything that we give to Israel. And I think that it's important, actually, that we support the Iron Dome.
Why?
Because I don't think Israeli civilians should be punished for the actions of their government, just like I don't think Palestinian civilians should be punished by the actions of their government, just like I don't think American civilians should be punished for the actions of Donald Trump.
Those were the questions that multiple audience members have, so thank you so much to audience members who submitted those questions. We have some live questions coming up. I'm going to call 4 names. Please come to the front and ask your question directly to the Congresswoman. Alice Clay, Louise Gobrin, Mimi Laboucherie, Roy Hoppinger.
Alice Clay.
Hi, Alice.
So I'm an educator here in San Diego. I live in your district, but I work in narrow license district. I teach history and government, and so I'm asking you as an elected representative, what advice would you give to someone like me that obviously is going to be struggling with how I teach the content that I should be teaching in the climate that we live in?
Yeah.
First off, big round of applause for Alice. Our teachers don't get enough appreciation. Okay, well, first of all, Alice, my favorite thing in the whole world is hanging out with kids, so invite me to your classroom and I will come. But here's my advice for you, in so much as I have any. I know my U.S. history and government teacher is still teaching and tells all the students about how I was late to class all the time. So I don't know if I have any real advice for you, but I think that one of the things that I've found helpful is looking at how other countries have experienced democratic backsliding and the rise of authoritarianism and what has been successful. And what we've seen in other countries is that when they are able to put together a broad-based pro-democracy movement, small d, we're not talking about the party, right, but pro-democracy movement, then they have actually a better than even chance of getting a better democracy on the other side. And that to me is our North Star. If I were teaching high school students every day, what I would have them do is start imagining what that better democracy could look like. Because we're going to need all of their ingenuity and creativity to figure out what that looks like. It's not going to be enough to go back to what we had before, because as I said, the status quo actually wasn't working for a lot of people. And I think young people in particular have this amazing ability to imagine the world differently, and that's what we need. So if I got to hang out with high school kids all day, that's what I would have them be focused on, is looking at, like, imagine you were in the Constitutional Convention. How would you create the system? What would it look like to make sure that actually we have a country where everyone gets a say and every voice matters and it is fair?
Thank you.
I wondered how we can have transparency and oversight in government when Trump has fired most of, if not all, of the watchdogs and half of Congress turned a blind eye to almost everything.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because we know that the inspector generals, all of those other watchdog agencies are really, really important. and we've seen them be gutted. Now, I'm hopeful that the courts will side with Congress because many of those actually do report to Congress and are congressionally mandated positions, but we're still waiting to see how those court cases go. But look, there's a constitutional crisis because some estimates are that about a third of the lawsuits against the administration Trump hasn't abided by or defied. But to me, the real constitutional crisis is that Congress has given up our constitutional role in providing oversight of the executive branch regardless of who's in power. It's why I've been doing a lot of work around war powers, for instance, trying to reclaim the war powers for Congress, which is what the Constitution says. Congress is who declares war and peace. It's why a lot of our negotiations around the appropriations process is trying to make sure that whatever we pass actually gets implemented, because in the Constitution, Congress has the power of the purse. And I'll be honest with you, I think it's going to take two things for Congress to actually be able to assert this oversight authority. I think it's going to take us being in the majority, where we then have subpoena power and the ability to call hearings and investigations and all of these things. And I think it's going to require my Republican colleagues hearing more from their constituents about the real harms that they are facing because of the policies that are being put in place. Because right now, I'll tell you, my colleagues will tell me privately that they are angry, disgusted, furious about what's happening. But they've been unwilling to do that publicly for many reasons, some valid, some not. But one of the things they tell me is that they feel like their voters voted for President Trump by and large, and that this is what their voters want. And so until they start hearing more from their constituents, I think hearing more about the real human stories in their districts from their constituents is going to be what gives them the backstop to hopefully have the courage we need them to have. Maybe that's giving them too much credit, but that's what I think.
Hi, my name is Louise. I'm a retired international educator, and I've been advocating to try to save our $40+ billion export industry of education. And I'm wondering, does it really have an effect for us to text, email, call, write Republican members when we are not their constituents? Or should we better spend our time and efforts?
Well, thank you for that question. Thank you for all your advocacy. So as Karen mentioned at the beginning, this is an official congressional event. So I'm prohibited from really being able to do grassroots organizing. So find me in another setting, and I can give you a little more specifics about the exact kind of organizing and advocacy that I think is most important. But what I can say here is that we really do care about hearing from our constituents, and we know who our constituents are. So I would say that instead of calling members of Congress that aren't your own, it would be better to talk to your friends and neighbors and family members and people you know all across the country. Be the human face on things, and then they can call their people, because we hear a lot about mis and disinformation right now and propaganda, right? I know a lot of folks are worried about that very rightly. Before Congress, I worked in international conflict resolution, which is why I know some of these statistics about Democratic backsliding in other countries. But also one of the things we looked at, don't worry, this is a kid-friendly event, it's fine. One of the things we've looked at is how propaganda has worked in other countries and what's the best way to combat it. And trusted messengers, people face-to-face or human conversations with people that folks actually know, that's one of our best ways to combat propaganda and mis and disinformation. So you all have an important role in being that trusted messenger, and instead of calling people who are going to know that you're not a constituent, try talking to the people in your community, in your life.
My name is Roy, and my question concerns support for local social security offices. I'm retired and I'm about to start drawing Social Security. I had an awful time trying to even get access information about my account. They had these hideous electronic requirements down that was similar to what about to befall the Medicaid beneficiaries, requiring to do all these onerous uploading and verification. And the reality isn't just that people don't always have access to that kind of technology. The reality is this technology is profoundly flawed and really isn't suitable for mass market transactions. And so I spent hours and hours and hours trying to just access information about my Social Security benefits. Thank God we have our local Social Security office here in Clairemont. I am seriously afraid that the Trumpsters are going to close down these offices for two specifically intended reasons: to reduce labor costs and also to frustrate legitimate beneficiaries from getting the benefits to which they're entitled by imposing these horrendous technological hurdles and requirements. So my question is, do you think we should have any concerns about this, and what can we do to make sure that our local Social Security offices remain open and adequately staffed? Thank you.
Well, Roy, thank you for that question. This is something we've been working on a lot. We know that DOGE has tried to cut thousands of workers from the Social Security Administration, has tried to get into the Social Security Administration computers and data systems. They actually had slated a Social Security office in Carlsbad to be shut down. We're pushing back hard on trying to get that, even though it's not my district, but the San Diego delegation is pushing hard to try and not have that happen. So yes, I think it's right to be worried. Right now they claim they're not closing the local offices, only the regional offices, which the office in Carlsbad is. So we're trying to do some oversight and figure out exactly what that looks like and making sure we're pushing back as much as we can on any of these local office closings. I think it's very concerning. The other thing I just want to make sure everyone here knows is that if you have an issue with a federal agency, whether it's Social Security, VA, IRS, anything, reach out to our office because we might actually be able to help you break through some of that red tape and get some of the answers you need. And we do that casework all the time for constituents in our district. And actually, it's one of my team's favorite things to do because, amidst all the craziness, it's really nice to be able to actually help people in real time get their stuff. So please reach out. We love being able to help you.
Excellent questions. Let's keep the good times rolling. The next four folks: Jonathan Kemper, Margaret Brooks, Twyla Arbuckle, and Rick Lalana.
Retired naval officer. Congratulations. Thank you for your service. So I am not speaking on behalf of the Navy. I just want to put that out there right now. I have some military, this is military protection stuff. We all see it. Our military is changing, and it's changing a lot for people that don't look a certain way. So I just want to say, on behalf of myself, Congresswoman, there are so many military women that are so thankful for you advocating for us. For the work that you're doing with IVF, specifically, I'm in a lot of groups where I hear a lot of women that are literally sharing your stories, sharing your videos about how you were up at the Hill talking about how you are trying to get legislation passed in the NDAA. I just want to say thank you so much for putting that out there. I've been here for 22 years. There's so many basic benefits that we just, take for granted. We would think, hey, we're working so hard every day, just trying to, get the mission passed, and knowing that there are people out there like you that are advocating for us means so much. So, point of my question is, as private citizens, because my service members can't come up here and talk, really I can. What are some of the things that we can do as private citizens to better advocate to help ensure that our military doesn't change the way that it seems to be changing?
Smiley, thank you for your service. Congratulations on your retirement. And I hope you aren't hoping for too much free time, because I have grand plans of connecting you with my military legislative folks and picking your brain on all the things we could be trying to fix. But look, this is one of the things that is so deeply frustrating to me, right? Because so many of my colleagues try and wrap themselves in the flag, try and say that they are the ones standing up for our service members and veterans, and then when it comes to actually funding the things we know our service members need, they don't want to do it. I'm actually really proud last year in the National Defense Authorization Act, we were able to get a number of really big bipartisan quality of life provisions in, including changing the way we do funding for child care workers, so that the military child care is able to hire more workers and open more classrooms and bring down that wait list. Getting a 12% pay bump for junior enlisted folks, so that they are not living under the poverty line, which I know you all think is crazy, but actually we have so many service members who are not making ends meet, right? Our San Diego Food Bank serves about 47,000 members of military families every single month. And working on military housing. So one of the things we're thinking about, because I sit on the House Armed Services Committee, and we are such a big military community in San Diego, is how do we make sure our military families get what they need? And then how do we also use the fact that despite everything going on, we can sometimes get bipartisan support for services for military families to actually address some of our broader issues. So for instance, right now, the military houses here in San Diego about 10% of service members in military housing. 90% are what they call on the economy, or just in the broader housing market. So we're trying to push DoD, work with the military, so that they build more military housing, so that, one, our service members can get housing, because I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten with folks living in their car because the wait lists are too long and they can't find housing, and they can't find somewhere that they can afford to live here in San Diego. But also to help take the pressure off the broader housing market that we know is such an issue for us here in San Diego. So win-win. And these are the kinds of things we're looking at. Childcare, housing. Part of why I'm pushing so hard on this TRICARE, the military insurance to cover IVF, is one, I think it's the right thing to do. Our service members are putting their life on the line and doing really dangerous things in their reproductive years. We should be helping them get the fertility services that they need. But also because we know that when TRICARE starts to cover something, it often pressures the public, the private insurance market to cover it as well. And so I'm hoping that this will also push so that everyone gets access to IVF and fertility coverage in their insurance. And so for all the questions of how we can advocate more, the real human stories are what we need. Because I can go to my colleagues all the livelong day and cite statistics, and boy do I have lots of statistics. I'm a real nerd. I got all the statistics. But statistics do not change people's minds. Real human stories do. So the more you all can share with us your real human stories, the more I can then take those to my colleagues and be like, no, you don't understand. This is not just something happening in theory. This is happening to a constituent in my district, and here's how. And if you have stories on what how what's happening in Washington, D.C. is impacting you, or just any other stories about how the federal government impacts your life, we have a portal on our website, sarajacobs.house.gov. We would love to have you share your stories, because that really is one of the most helpful things for me to be able to advocate with my colleagues and be able to make change.
Hello, Congresswoman. My name is John.
Hi, John.
Hi. Question I have is, well, I've never worried about free and fair elections. And in a democracy, in order for us to think about the day after, we need reasonable, honest people back in office. And so we saw what happened in 2020, right? It was a free and fair election by all measures. And we saw what President Trump did afterward. We also saw in 2024, I'm a fan of statistics too, as well as computer science, but we also saw that there were massive calls for recounts after Kamala Harris lost the election. We also are observing what seems to be the dismantling of safeguard guardrails for election integrity at the federal level. So, for the first time in my life, I'm concerned that the 2026 midterms may be influenced by dishonest operators. And my question specifically is, what is the plan from the Democratic Party to ensure that we have a valid election? Thank you.
So, prior to Congress, I worked in these post-conflict transitions in conflict countries. One of my specialties was political violence. And so I did a lot of work on election violence and election security in places like Nigeria and Kenya and Fiji. And then many of you know that I was elected in 2020, which means that my 4th day in office was January 6th. And I was in the House gallery, literally hiding under the seats, introducing myself to my new colleagues because I hadn't met them yet. And I remember sitting there and thinking, oh my goodness, how is this the most dangerous situation I've ever been in? Like, I've been in Somalia, like really dangerous places. But also, like, wow, I'm really in the place I need to be because my expertise is going to be needed here in the United States. And so, I will be honest with you, I am slightly less concerned about the technical electoral system here being corrupted in 2026. And that's in part because we have a very distributed system of elections here in the United States. So it's actually quite hard for us at the federal level to try and change how folks run elections, because it's not even just that each state is in charge of running their own elections. Each county within each state is responsible for running their own elections. And so that distributed system is very frustrating when some of us are trying to push reforms, but it is also a huge resilience because it's actually very hard to really fundamentally change that very distributed system because it's so distributed. Now, with that being said, we're seeing what's happening in Texas right now with the redistricting. And you, I'm sure, have heard that Governor Newsom has said that if Texas goes forward, California will as well. And so these are some of the ways we're planning on fighting back, right? Because in a perfect world, we would all have an independent commission, all redistricting would be fair. Right now, we're in a world where some people have unfair redistricting and some people have fair redistricting. And And so I think it will be important that everyone plays by the same rules. I hope they're good rules. But I think, that's one of the things we're really looking at as a party on how we fight back to make sure 2026 is a fair election.
Good evening, Congresswoman. My name is John, and Twyla. Similar to you, I'm a Marine Corps veteran. Close, but a little different. Anyways, Congresswoman, my question is, we've seen history repeat itself a lot. I'm not going to get into how it's repeating, but I don't think one thing that we've taken into consideration is McCarthy-style type hearings. I have already been cautioned at work and in other settings to cool it with my rhetoric and my being outspoken. Has anybody in Congress given thought of, this could happen again?
Absolutely. I mean, it's something a lot of us are thinking about all the time. How do we protect free speech? How do we make sure that free speech is allowed, even the speech we don't agree with, which is the point of free speech, right? It's very easy to protect free speech that you agree with, but the whole point is you get to say something even if we don't agree. I think, it's a dangerous time then. I've been very concerned as the youngest Jewish member of Congress that a lot of what's being done around curtailing free speech has been done in the name of combating anti-Semitism, especially on college campuses. And I spend a lot of time talking to young Jews because I'm the youngest Jewish member of Congress. And what I hear from Jewish students is that actually nothing that's happening, not revoking funding, not the revocation of student visas, is making them feel any safer. In fact, the opposite, they're feeling less safe. Because now they're feeling like they are being punished for these Trump administration decisions that are not actually addressing the issue. Meanwhile, at the same time, the Trump administration has cut funding for the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, which is who actually adjudicates anti-Semitism on college campuses. But I think it's really important that we don't self-censor and that we continue to speak up. Because when you look at other countries, that self-censoring is really what leads to that path. It's when it's not actually that the authorities are stopping people from saying things, it's that people are stopping themselves from saying things. And I think protecting free speech, again, whether you agree with it or not, obviously it's so fundamental to America that it's literally Article 1. But I think it's also just like really important in this moment.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Margaret, and you talked about this a little bit, but my question is, do people have real conversations across the aisle in person saying, how can you do that? I mean, I got a letter from somebody else that represents us, who will not be named, but, the letter goes, I wrote a strongly worded email to, I was like, really? Don't you guys work in the same building? Like, do you ever go over there and go, come on, we can't vote for this? And you maybe, find out how the sausage is made. Like, what do you guys do? And how do you try to convince each other?
No, it's a good question. It's a good question. So I actually talk to my Republican colleagues a lot. In fact, there are a few I consider friends, despite what they do in public. I think I would say, like, of my colleagues who you see on TV, like, half are as crazy as they seem on TV. And, like, the other half, when the cameras are off, are, like, relatively normal. And, like, I'll be honest with you, I can't decide which one I respect more. Because, like, one is easier to work with, but at least the other is, like, honest. But there's, like, the big super political issues, right? The things that, like, we're fighting over or we come attack at, that it's really hard for us to find common ground on right now. I'll be honest with you. Then like one level down, we actually are still getting a lot done. So, you know, Twyla mentioned my amendment that would have IVF and fertility treatment covered for all service members. Now, that was passed in a bipartisan fashion through the House Armed Services Committee. We're hopeful we'll be able to, there was a similar provision in the Senate Armed Services Committee version of the National Defense Authorization Act, and we're hopeful we'll be able to get it done. And that's the kind of thing that is like that one level down, that is like, you can still find ways to work together on. I worked with Anna Paulina Luna, a Republican from Florida, to try and get proxy voting for parental leave for members of Congress. And I'll be honest with you, my team hates when I talk about this, but I'm going to do it anyways. Before he left Congress, Matt Gaetz and I had 8 bills together. And look, I will work with anyone to deliver for our community, okay? But there are those areas of finding common ground, and to me, the way I think about bipartisanship is that I don't think we should try and find the most watered down version of something that is like the lowest common denominator, because then actually, even if it passes, no one feels the difference, and it doesn't actually make a change. To me, it's finding what are those big things that we both want to do, even if it's literally only one thing that we agree on out of 99, and figuring out how we partner together to get those things done.
Yeah, hi, my name is Rick. I'm a bartender. Thank you for having me on this town hall. I really appreciate your coming.
Okay, also, nice Padres shirt.
Oh, thank you.
Go Padres.
Go Padres.
You guys, have you guys watched the Mets series? We're doing so good. Yeah.
Anyhow, my question for you is, as Democrats with a capital D, we seem to be directionless. There seems to be a sense of malaise. Where are we going? What's going on? So what direction are we heading? And when are we going to go fight, fight, fight?
All right, besides why the cost of living is so expensive in San Diego, this is the second most question I get all the time, everywhere I go right now. And I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I feel like, not you, but sometimes I feel like when we ask this question, it's because we think there's some savior or some leader who's going to swoop in and we can all vote for them and they'll tell us what to do and they'll solve the problem and then everything will be great. Yay!
No messiahs?
There are no messiahs. There's no wizard behind the curtain pulling all the strings. I wish there was. There isn't a leader of the Democratic Party right now, and I actually think that's okay. Because it isn't going to be one person who pulls us out of this. It's going to be each of us doing our part. And that's not going to look the same. Like I said, we're playing zone defense, right? This is not man-to-man. We don't each of us have to do everything. Just all of us together have to. And I don't know, I came of age in the Obama years. I worked for Barack Obama. I love him. I think a lot of us thought, like, okay, good, we got Barack Obama elected. We did it. Change happened. Change came. That's not how it works, right? Like, one election, one person doesn't fix this. And so to me, it's figuring out, like, I think it's good that we have lots of different messengers right now who are trying out lots of different messages because we need to talk to lots of different people. And I hear you on wanting us to fight more. I'm as frustrated as you are. I think that, you know, in this realm of zone defense, different people need to play different parts. I have tried to be as forward-leaning as I can on fighting back against what I see as the really horrific overreaches and the things that are really harming our community. I know others have as well. But like, I mean, this is gonna sound kind of harsh and I don't mean this towards you. Like, I'm not gonna solve this problem for you. I will do my best, we will work together, but it's literally gonna take all of us. So like, we're working working on a message. We will eventually have a presidential nominee for 2028. But like, that is actually not what's gonna fix this. What's gonna fix this is each of us doing the hard work of talking to our friends and neighbors and community members and family members all across the country, of doing that deep community building, of showing up places like this, but also showing up helping clean the park in our community and helping make sure our local public school has what it needs, because that kind of community building, we've kind of lost that muscle, right? Like, I read this book recently about how protest movements have changed in the age of social media. And part of why the March on Washington and other big marches like that were so impactful back in the day were because in order to get that many people at the same place at the same time, it was basically the culmination of years of deep community organizing, deep community building, decision making, figuring out how you do all of that, right? Now, it's, no offense, pretty easy to get a bunch of people in the same place at the same time. You like do one tweet, one Facebook post, right? So it's almost reversed. Now we need to take the big march, and don't get me wrong, I think those are really important, and I think showing up at those are really important. But now we need to take those and figure out how we use that as the start of the real community building organizing that we need to do. And so, you know, we're working on this summer, hopefully having some more information on what that could look like and looking at other countries and things like that. That I think, you know, again, this is not on you. You're asking the question that is on everyone's mind. But like, let's stop asking for a savior and let's start being the one we feel like our community needs. That's how I feel right now.
All right, next 4 questions. Seth Senegal, Connor Madison, Randy Diceborough, and Will Cronin. Madison. Morrison. Connor. C-O-N-N-O-R. Just come on up. Yeah. If your Gmail has a 22, it's you.
Hello, my name is Seth. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm going to try really hard to turn this into a lecture, but I do want to put in a couple of a bit of background details. I work with a lot of folks who deal with great deal of trauma in my work. And many people have been expressing to me deep concern over behaviors that they're seeing at on a wide scale. And they're saying all the same thing, is that these people are acting like the people who abused me, people who exploited me, people who neglected me. And I want to kind of put out there for anyone listening, I really do feel like collectively we fail to recognize the kinds of folks that are currently causing a great deal of trouble in our society. There is a mindset that I've had expressed very clearly to me of, I can do whatever I want, and it is your fault for failing to stop me. That is what we are up against. And so my question to you is, what can be done? We've already addressed this to a nice degree, but I'd like to spell it out a little bit as well. What can be done to help galvanize those whose duty it is to defend the Constitution of the United States, so that when the time comes for them to make a decision whether or not to abide by their oath or to follow immoral, illegal orders, they have the courage to quite possibly stand out against the crowd and yet do what is right. You've said many times that you have colleagues on the opposite side of the aisle who aren't happy about what's going on, but yet have not been able to find that courage to stand up and publicly say, I am against this. The only way we are going to harnessed. I think people are finally starting to get it. What can be done to help stiffen the resolve of the individuals whose job it is to actually make America work?
Well, first of all, thank you for your work, because we need more mental health clinicians in this country, and so I know you're doing really important work. And I go to therapy. We should make therapy accessible for everyone. Therapy is very important. To your question, though, so I sit on the House Armed Services Committee, and so a lot of what I'm doing is trying to think about how we can make sure that we are giving our military service members the tools to make sure that they are following the law and following lawful orders. And one of the things I've been doing is that in every hearing that we've had, actually, I've asked every commander who might be put in a position, so the Marine Commandant, the North Commander who oversees all the troops in the United States, do you understand the Posse Comitatus Act, which is the law that says that the military cannot be used for domestic law enforcement? What are you doing to make sure that the service members under your command are abiding by that and have the information they need and the tools they need to not follow an unlawful order? And we've actually seen, in many cases, we've had those service members thank us because they are pushing back, and the more that they have folks like us in Congress bolstering them, the stronger their internal cases. And, like I said, one of the things I did was I was supposed to go on this oversight visit to LA to see what our troops were doing up there to make sure that they were abiding by this division of domestic law enforcement not being allowed. They canceled the trip, but shortly thereafter, they sent the Marines home. And a big part of that, I think, is that they know that people are watching. They know that there will be questions asked. And so, I don't think our service members want to do the wrong thing, right? They signed up to defend our country. And so how do we give them the tools they need and the backing they need to not follow an unlawful order? And I think that's true of our law enforcement too, right here in the state of California. There's a law that our local law enforcement is not allowed to work on immigration enforcement issues. I think that's really important because we're already seeing reporting of crimes going down just because people are so afraid that if they report a crime, something may happen to them if they're undocumented or if someone in their family is. We're already seeing kids, I know it's summertime, but not going to school, not going to childcare, not going to the places because their families are so worried about taking them there. And so I think the more we can protect that division, the actual better it is for the safety of our community. So I met with all of our local law enforcement to make sure they understand that we're watching, to make sure they know that if they feel like they're getting a federal request that they are not comfortable with, to come to us, that we will help deconflict that, we will help play sort of that bad cop role. We're trying to do what we can to show up and make sure that people understand the rules, but also know that we're there backing them up as they are trying to do what they can on the inside to make sure that those rules are followed. And thank you very much to our amazing police folks who are here making sure we're all protected today. Thank you.
Hello, Congresswoman. Thank you for being here tonight. It's an honor to speak with you. I'm a registered independent voter, and I've heard from you tonight that you are seeking common ground in a lot of areas with your colleagues, and I really do appreciate that. My question that I wrote down was for you, is there anything at all in the current administration that you agree with in terms of policies that you feel like you can work with, and that people have different of opinion here can actually say, oh, well, we agree on that. How about that?
Oh, Okay, that's a good question. Let me think for a second. Okay, I think I have two answers for it. Okay, the first is on IVF. President Trump has said he wants to be the father of IVF, the fertilization president, things like that. But, like, let's take him at his word. He cares about increasing access to fertility. He supposedly cares about getting families to have more children if they want to. Well, I say if they want to. He just wants them to have more kids. And I think that there's potentially some things we can do there. I'm hoping he'll be supportive of our IVF for military families, which is what we're trying to pass as one like very concrete thing he can do. But he said the right things on IVF and access to fertility treatments. And you know, while I don't think a award is going to make people have more kids, I do think like thinking about why people aren't having the kids they want to have is important, because that leads us to making sure we're investing in things like child care and the child tax credit and other things like that. So that's one. The second is, this is maybe a little more niche, but I agree so far with this policy on Syria. I think it was the right move to get rid of some of the sanctions and kind of extend a diplomatic olive branch and diplomatic representation to the new Syrian government. I think that was the right call, and I hope that he continues down that path.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Congressman. I am, first of all, I've got to express my appreciation for your coming here and talking to your constituents. I'm speaking as a Democrat who goes all the way back to campaigning for Senator Kefauver. And remember, some of you might remember the coonskin cap. I lost mine. Now, I've got here a printout of your priorities survey, and I've written to you before about this. You and Congressman Peters and many, many, many other elected Democrats don't seem to even have listed as a priority tax return and taxing the wealth. And I don't understand it. I don't know about the rest of you, but I kind of resent having to pay a larger percentage of my income than people who make hundreds or thousands of what I make. And it seems to me this is a natural issue. I kind of think, although maybe not, that there might even be some Republicans who resent paying a higher percentage of their income as tax than people like Elon, not to mention the president. So I don't know what's going on with this issue about tax return and taxing the wealth of billionaires and multi-billionaires. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I have to look at that survey. I think we probably put that in the category of economic fairness or something like that. But I hear you. Look, I think the wealthy and big corporations need to pay more in taxes. Many of you know my family. I come from a family that has a lot of wealth. My grandfather started Qualcomm. I think families like mine should be taxed more. I support a wealth tax. I support looking at all the various ways we can get at that, margin loan tax, things like that. It's partially why I introduced the Legacy Act, which is the bill that would increase the estate tax, which, unless you have $14 million in debt, does not apply to you, so that we can then use that to fund childcare for everyone, because I think it's important that as people are passing on, we're investing in the next generation for everyone. I like to say it's like taxing trust fund kids to create a trust fund for all of America's kids. I also think, for instance, we talk a lot about the solvency of Social Security. Well, many people don't know, actually, if you make an income of more than $400,000, you no longer pay payroll tax on that.
That's wrong.
And I think that's wrong. I think everyone should pay the same percentage of payroll tax into Social Security, whether you make $15 an hour or whether you make $600,000 a year. And all in all, I think, given all of the shenanigans that the Republicans put into the one big ugly bill, I think whenever we're back in power, it's not going to be enough to nibble around the edges. I think we're going to need to wholesale reform of our tax system to actually make it fair.
This will be the last question, folks.
No pressure.
Hi, my name's Connor, and something that for me has been a concern that I personally found has been sort of drowned out with a lot of stuff that's been going on in the last 6-7 months has been Robert F. Kennedy. Disgraceful family name. And him being Secretary of Health and Human Services, as someone who is myself autistic on the spectrum, I found a lot of his rhetoric and opinions surrounding this field being ableistic, dehumanizing, and what he's proposed with his study to find a cure or cause for autism, and he's he mentioned creating a database for autistic people. I found to be concerning and dare I say eugenicsy. Plans to combat that, or is there anything you've heard and floating around to go against that? Thanks.
I know I've thanked all of you for your questions, but I really do feel very thankful for your questions, but especially for you, I know it's not easy to get up and share your own story with that vulnerability, so thank you for doing that. Look, I think what RFK Jr. is doing is horrible on many realms, but particularly to folks who have autism. Actually, just this morning, I went and visited a child care center that has typically developing kids and neurodivergent kids together as a form of therapy, and it was so amazing to see that actually if you give these kids the supports that they need, they can really thrive. And it's really on all of us that for so many generations and so many people, we just haven't actually given them the support that they need to thrive. That's not us. That's not on people who have neurodivergency. And so we're trying to figure out how we can get more funding to programs like that, how we can protect Medicaid, which pays for a lot of these support services for families, and also just talk about all of the amazingness of contributions that people with autism have contributed. Because part of what I find so distasteful is that RFK Jr. talks about it like this some kind of horrible thing. I have found some of the people in my life who are on the spectrum or have autism, they see the world differently and they come up with the most creative ways to solve problems.
to have all of the creativity that we can find. Like, why are we saying this is a bad thing? We need everyone with their brains to work all different kinds of ways trying to solve the big problems that we're facing. And so, you know, I am trying to push back as much as I can on this harmful rhetoric, trying to highlight people in our community who have done amazing things so that we're not only hearing about the bad things, but also celebrating the good. And I really, really appreciate you standing up and being here, so thank you.
Folks, I want to thank everyone who came out to join us tonight and helping this event successful. Your questions were amazing. It's inspiring to see people gathered here, making your voices heard. As Congresswoman Jacobs has mentioned, her office will be holding town halls through a variety of mediums and locations to make sure the Congresswoman and her office are accessible to you. Again, information on future town halls can be found at sarajacobs.house.gov/town-halls, or just Google Sara Jacobs Town Hall. And with that, Congresswoman Sara Jacobs, we'd love to hear some final thoughts from you.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you, Kara. She did a great job, huh? And thank you to our folks here at Madison and everyone who put this on. Look, I know things feel really tough right now. And like I meant it when I said at the beginning, like, give yourself a pat on the back. You're already doing the most important thing you could be doing right now. You showed up. You asked questions. You held me accountable, which is what you should be doing. I know we weren't able to get to everyone's questions. If you put your contact information on the question card or you submit it online with your contact information, we'll try to get you an answer. You can also send us an email at sarajacobs.house.gov or give us a call, 619-280-5353. I want to make sure we do answer all your questions, even the ones we didn't have time to get to tonight. And mostly, thank you. It is the honor of my life to get to represent you, even amidst all of the chaos, even amidst all of the craziness. And I'm really, really grateful that you all have put your faith and trust in me to be your representative right now. So thank you all so much, and have a great rest of the week.